It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app on a Friday, where we'll talk to Clinton Yates in just 10 minutes. Really looking forward to that today after Muriel Bowser's conversation this morning on the Sports Junkies about the future of the Commanders potentially being at RFK. Of course, Yates, not only a D.C. native who cares about all of these things and is now a national commentator, but someone who earlier in his career at the Washington Post covered these issues. This would have been his beat. And so we'll talk to Yates about that coming up at the quarter hour mark today. Obviously, day 3 in Ashburn for the Commanders, and it was a hot one. I did not go out there in person today. Instead, I just read the tweets about people, almost fainting in the stands. Possibly someone did faint. Everyone's okay. But it was hot out there today. I mean, I did walk outside for a little bit and was like, I would like to be back in air conditioning. This is terrible. Being in a football practice right now would be miserable. Nevertheless, participating in it, just being there. But alas, there's work to be done. It is August, or almost August, and this is how it is in training camp. It's hot. It's miserable. You get in shape for the season. You get ready mentally, physically, and it's challenging in all of those facets. But it's also a place and a time where you challenge yourself. And I think one of the really interesting quotes that came out today was a great reminder from Ron Rivera about exactly where we are in the schedule. Because, oh my God, here I go being, just saying something that people don't like to hear about Sam Howell. That's just a statement of fact information, but Sam Howell threw his first interception today. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. No problem with it at all. Not one. If you're not throwing a couple of interceptions in camp, you're not trying hard enough. And that was the exact point Rivera made afterwards. And I thought this was excellent perspective from Ron. The abridged version of his comment is, you talk to Sam afterwards, because he was actually asked about Brissett, who threw an interception or two today as well. And the question was basically, is Brissett trying stuff because he's a veteran and he knows that, it won't work, or that he's trying to figure out if it would work. And Ron said, actually, both quarterbacks did that today. You asked Howell after the interception, hey, what happened there? And he said, I know I had this, but I wanted to see if I had that. He tries that. Turns out he doesn't have it. And Cam Curl, in this particular case, gets an interception. And, good job by Cam Curl. He does his job. But it's a learning lesson for Howell to go okay, if this guy's here and we have this route concept and, I try to squeeze it in there, not going to work, especially against guys the caliber of Cam Curl. But I can't make that throw. But I know I had the other thing, which is something you can basically confirm on tape, and that's perfectly fine. And it's a good reminder to that the journalism part of people asking questions is important. To just watch is not enough. You need the context. You need to understand what people were thinking in any given moment. And it's what makes training camp, I think, really fun for all of us to watch as fans, as media, and as coaches and players as well. It's a chance to try a lot while getting a basic fundamental understanding of who you are as a team, as a player, as a unit, as a position group, as a connection between receiver, DB, or receiver, quarterback, etc., without the pressure of a game breathing down your neck. And to experiment, to try stuff. It's a gigantic lab. And the farther you go into it, the closer you get to the regular season, the less you can have that approach, the more you need to stop trying stuff and really fine-tune being at the good stuff. You keep repeating mistakes, all you do is make the mistake. You want to be able to not make, hey, I know I got this, I'm going to keep trying that. It's not working. Okay, now I get in the game, I know that this is the thing I have to do, and it's the first time you've actually made the throw. So, there's a kind of a timeline to all of this. But I thought on the day where Howell has his first statistical that the explanation was it was actually a positive experience. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously, the fan support continues to be a story. I think tomorrow is going to be a massive, massive, massive turnout on a Saturday. One thing that I am watching, I got a comment on YouTube about this, and I certainly saw it with my own eyes yesterday. I don't think that they were prepared for the amount of fans that came out. That, and again, Thursday at 9 a.m., like, who would have thought? Friday, in damn near 100-degree heat. Real feel was probably over 100 today with the humidity, the heat index. I don't think they're expecting all these people on a weekday. So there's pretty substantial lines to get to and from the park, with the parking being at Dulles Town Center. And do they have enough buses, and can they get people quickly in and out? It's one of those things that if you don't expect that, then I will give them the grace with this new ownership group to get it fixed, but they do need to get that fixed. And also, I will just, as much of a public service as I can provide here, tell you, if you're planning on going to camp, expect it to be jammed. One, I would bring water and make sure that, I'm pretty sure you can bring water in. I mean, obviously they love to sell you stuff there, and they do have some refreshments, and there's food trucks. It was funny. I was standing next to Mitch Tischler yesterday on the sideline, and it was getting towards the end of practice, which means you're getting closer to lunchtime. We both kind of looked at each other and went, "Is that barbecue?" Yeah. Let's go get some pork. We didn't, but we wanted to. We stayed like diligent journalists and watched practice despite the smell of delicious barbecue wafting over us, calling to us from beyond yonder of the stands. But bring water, stay hydrated, get there early, anticipate having to wait a little bit to get from the parking lot to the practice facility, and know that you're also probably going to have that on the way out as well. Again, I would trust, especially Josh Harris, Mr. Egress Ingress, the term that I literally never heard before, but it's one that he is very fond of using in terms of FedEx Field and getting people in and out. I am sure it is a priority for him to try to get people in and out of the practice facility faster, as the attendance at training camp has skyrocketed. Celebrity sighting today. Kevin Durant was in attendance, which is fun. And we'll have a lot more from training camp today coming up, not only throughout the show, but specifically our brand new segment, Pick 6 at 6, where we pick the 6 most interesting things from training camp from the Commanders on any given day, and we give them to you at 6 o'clock. Today, you'll hear from Rivera, you'll hear from Brian Robinson, you'll hear from Deron Payne as well. That's coming up at 6. Again, Muriel Bowser was on the Junkies this morning, and it was a really, really interesting conversation. There's a lot of meat on the bone from the conversation between Bowser and the Junkies about the Commanders' future at RFK, both from a sports side and from like a, hey, we're a DC show and, want to represent DC and obviously not just DC, but the DMV and the people all over the area, and speak up on behalf of all the parties involved here. So we're going to dive in from a lot of different angles coming up at 5:30, but it's also what we talked about with Clinton Yates today, or what we're going to talk about, I should say, with Clinton Yates today, and that conversation is next. Yates joins us here on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, youtube.com/at the Team 980, the on-demand content at Craig Hoffman, where you can watch our weekly interview with Clinton Yates, who joins us now. Yates, I think by the end of the weekend, with this training camp content, we could be over 3,000 YouTube subscribers, and I'm pretty pumped about it.
That's pretty amazing, and I'm glad you brought that up because that gets to exactly what I wanted to discuss. And I was thinking about this yesterday, and somebody tagged me in a Twitter post and said, Ashburnistan is no longer. And I thought about that because those of you who know, back when I wrote for the Washington Post, I coined that term as this way to describe everything that was such a disaster at the headquarters based on the regime of Dan Snyder. And, you know, I will say this with confidence. I'm okay with retiring that term. The goal was met. The Death Star has been exploded as far as I'm concerned. And quite frankly, I am enjoying, just as a former resident and a native, seeing people happy. You know, like the price of admission to polite society was worth the fight, I think, for this fan base. And so for all these people who are like, oh, yeah, well, don't get so high on your horse, Burgundy and Gold fans. They're not going to be that good. Vegas only has them at 6 or 7 wins. Okay, but there's really no way, and I don't really know, quite frankly, on sort of a larger level, if any fan base currently in America that is living and breathing can relate to what Commanders fans are dealing with and are experiencing. There's just not an akin situation. Now, we talked about the Browns last week in terms of the team leaving and the team coming back. That's a little different because not everybody sat around and crapped on the Browns forever outside of, you know, whatever, because the team wasn't even there. This is such a unique circumstance in the American sports world, Craig, that I'm fascinated to watch just how it develops plainly because, you know, I'll get off my high horse here, but there is no precedent to erasing the slate and having a clean table of things where you can't just kind of blame everybody that used to be there. That was a big part of the discourse around this team for a long time was same old thing, same old thing, same old thing. Well, there's a new thing. You got a new house. You got a new car. Can't blame it on the old transmission. Can't blame it on the old housekeeper. And you don't want to either. It's just a very interesting experience that I'm fascinated to watch going forward.
All right, multiple things to unpack here. One, I think you are correct that there's no other fan base that's similar. Like you could piece together the shame pieces, the bad performance pieces, the whatever piece the Browns are. It feels like the team was taken away piece because like the Clippers, for instance, I did a podcast last night with Danny Parkins. He does a big national NFL pod, and he made the comparison to the Clippers, where it's like. He's like, I don't remember when Donald Sterling got voted out a pep rally like what we had last week, right? And it's like, well, the Clippers weren't good. There was nothing to be proud of before, so there was no return to glory because there was no glory. And by the way, the history of that franchise before Sterling, I don't even think they were in L.A. that long. So
no, they were in San
very,
Diego.
very, very different. And Buffalo before that. So very, very different circumstances there. The closest world stage thing I can think of is Manchester United, but like where they were glory, what best team in the league, arguably one of the biggest fan bases in the league. Certainly, when you expand out beyond the league and look at their global impact, one of the biggest in the world. They get bought out by American owners of all people, and they have not been nearly as good since. And there has been like some shame and scandal, the flirtation with the Super League and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But like. There's no congressional investigate like that. The thing that separates this one, I think, compared to everything else is not only is the team mediocre and bad, and does it feel like it's stolen and mismanaged, but you then also have the literal criminal behavior that goes on to it. And to me, like that is the heart of what you meant by Ashburnistan. Like there is, literally criminally bad behavior. And you always had a very nice, concise way of explaining the term. I don't want to butcher it. So what was the saying that you used?
Once proud nation ruined by the greed and avarice of small men.
Yes. And that's gone. And I agree with you that it's gone, but journalism hat on. Like, why are you confident that a week and a day into this that you can like, yep, we're good. Ashburnistan is done.
I think it's because mainly there's just sort of a time for something to end. I mean, that term in my mind's eye was very much about Dan Snyder. It was very much about what happened. And I would almost even, I'm not going to extend it to Jack Kent Cooke, but I've said this before. That guy was not some saint either. You know what I mean? Which is half the reason why, getting to my next point, the team isn't even in the district anymore. You can look that story up on your own if you want to know how he dealt with that with Sharon Pratt, the mayor at the time. I just feel that Josh, at the very least, as in Harris and Magic, should be given their own sort of thing. And if it fails miserably with them, that's one thing. But that is legitimately a separate regime. But that does get me to my next point that I wanted to ask you about, which is there's a story I read in the Washington Post 2 days ago about how D.C. might be getting control back of the RFK site, which brings a whole host of other discussions because there is this notion that the rightful place and the most sensible place for the football team to play is at RFK Stadium. And yeah, there is a nostalgic element. I've seen football games in that stadium en masse. But I do think there is a real discussion to be had about whether or not that actually makes the most sense beyond the fairy tale notion in our minds of what that used to be. The district has changed a lot. The NFL has changed a lot. Obviously, that franchise has changed a lot. And on some levels, the fan base has changed a lot. I'm not necessarily sure that that makes the most sense, even for the city to do for, let's just say, 10 games a year, presuming they don't make the playoffs every year. And so I'm very interested, again, just from a sort of news development standpoint, Craig, what happens at each stage of the game, because there's no precedent for this in terms of the NFL in any particular city.
So I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to flip this right back around at you because you did grow up here, lived here, and not only that, like you covered the city before you got to the sports section at the Post. Like you did coverage of Washington D.C. and local issues like this. And my kind of take on this at this point is I have yet to see a better plan for that area than a mixed-use site. Meaning It's not all just going to be a stadium and then everything else is blocked off. It is the stadium is the center of a shopping and living region that becomes the new neighborhood in D.C. And could you build that without a football stadium and have some people move to that part of town? Sure. But is that actually a better use than if people were coming down there not just for 10 football games a year, but for potentially soccer games of the local variety. If you wanted to play some that are at Audi, one proposal that I've heard behind the scenes is that, for instance, they would do a stadium and practice facility down there, and the practice facility would be more reminiscent of what they have in Frisco for the Cowboys, where it's actually a 10,000 seat stadium, and maybe the Washington Spirit play there. And so you now have two pro teams that are using the facility, and you have high school football that can be played there. And in the big stadium, you have concerts, and you have all the things that are at FedEx Field now and at every other stadium in the country. The arena tours, the potential, obviously, when you build a new NFL stadium, you get a Super Bowl. The Olympics could certainly be in play at some point in the future. And I guess like the question I would have is, you've got people on city council saying there's like we have all this data that says stadiums are not the best use of public funds. And I agree with that. But if public funds could go to revitalizing the infrastructure, widening some of the roads and in that area to make to use the Josh Harris term, ingress and egress, the ins and outs of the stadium better on game days, and it could revitalize the metro in that part of town and make that stadium or that metro stop at the stadium much, much easier to flow people in and out on a game day or a concert day or on an event day. Like, that's where the public money should go. The rich guys who just bought the team pay for the actual stadium. And to me, that actually is a really good use of everybody's money. And it puts it in a central location and all the other benefits spiritually and logistically of RFK.
Here's the thing about that is that I actually feel, as somebody that also used to live near there, that area is almost a little too, how do I explain this? It's only ever really seen a stadium in anybody's lifetimes. And I don't mean that a stadium would not be a good idea there, but that's actually decent view property. There are better things you could do that did not include a stadium that could also revitalize. And I don't think those things are in opposition, but I would probably do something like this. Audi Field's footprint I believe, is what should be at a site like that. You want to build a big stadium? Well, build it at Audi Field. Build it at Buzzard Point. Build it at a place where everybody can get in and get out, but you don't have this sort of monstrosity taking over what is otherwise also just a place that people might want to live because of its access to a lot of things, not just because people want to come there for football. It is, in fact, extremely complicated. Back in the day, a council member named Vincent Orange had this whole plan to build movie sets there and make it sound stages and all this kind of stuff, which, at that point, what's the difference between that and an NFL stadium if we're thinking about large buildings that are going to try to bring in a lot of stuff? This was 15 years ago, but I do think that is going to become something that is a real issue for Harris in terms of who are you serving? Because the people in that area that could probably use that sort of revitalization are also probably the people who are going to be displaced if all of this stuff happens. And then you've got an entirely separate circumstance in terms of the residents that are being availed of whatever this development is. That's a separate problem that we deal with gentrification in D.C., which is that everybody wants to build something up, but then once it gets built up, nobody who was already there gets to come back, i.e. the way Navy Yard looks now. And sure, right. Navy Yard is great, but there was a time when people actually lived there, and none of those people have been allowed to return. And so there's thoughts of maybe you just let folks live in terms of that, and sort of, you want to build a stadium, build a stadium. Build it wherever you want, but you don't have to force it down the folks' throats at RFK, because it's not like necessarily everybody loved that anyway, if we're being quite honest. The idea of your neighborhood getting taken over for 8 weekends a year at minimum.
Yeah, Clint Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show. And that's the struggle, right? Is like, I think a lot of people look at Navy Yard and go, well, Nats Park is the model. It's such a success. Look at all the everything. And then you kind of peel back the curtain and, whoa, that's a lot of ugly gentrification that's happening underneath there. And I say that knowing, like, the building that we work out of is one of those buildings. Like, Correct. It is what it is. The thing that I think is interesting about the RFK site, though, is I think it's 190 acres.
Yeah.
There's nobody currently living there. There's people in the neighborhood surrounding it. But the actual federal land, like, this is kind of my thing, Clinton, is like, if there was such a great idea that could have been executed, they haven't been using that stadium at all since 2018. Hold on. Let me rewind.
Whatever. Knock the damn stadium down. But you might as well make it a national park. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying.
Which is one of the things that people are saying, let's make it a green space. There are plenty other
things you can do that have nothing to do with the stadium that, to me, would have equal value, but probably aren't going to happen because this idea of the stadium being there in our lifetimes is all that we know. You see what I'm saying? And so, like, I don't have a problem with building a stadium in D.C. I just don't actually know that RFK is the place for it. Again, where Audi Field is in fact a perfect place for a football stadium. If we're thinking about how people get there, if you're talking about coming from Virginia or Maryland, that's my personal opinion, without gumming up a lot of the rest of the city that otherwise would not have that kind of traffic flow. If we really want to get into the distribution of public transportation on that particular side of town. But I kind of feel like I want to see RFK without a stadium just for what it may be to the city. You know what I mean? And that's personal. I don't live there anymore. I'm not acting as if this is some sort of constituent complaint, but I think that that's going to be much trickier now that the demographics of the district have changed than I think people are giving it credit for as standard residents. The assumption is, of course, everybody wants it back at RFK, but once you get that wheel going and once that actually gets into place, I'm not so sure that's going to be that easy.
Yeah, the DC United Audi Field angle of it is interesting. Mayor Bowser was actually on with the Junkies this morning, and they talked about Poplar Point, and she said that's not an ideal place, which I thought was interesting because that's, opposite of the exact place you're talking about. It's just the other side of the bridge, and that would seem rather ideal.
Yeah. I mean, again, political interests. She's the mayor. I know Muriel, but, again, what the mayor thinks is ideal is not necessarily what residents is going to think is ideal, which is not necessarily what the fan base is going to think is ideal, which certainly is not necessarily what the ownership group is going to think is ideal. You got a guy from Bethesda dealing with a fan base that's largely from Virginia, if we're being honest, dealing with, a mayor of D.C. This is where things get hairy.
Well, this is the other dynamic that's changed, too. And, I think most people listening probably understand this, but, like, I think there's a real fear of putting it in Virginia from the team because you've got the Ravens now. And, like, yes, there's clearly going to be a lot of generational fans that stick with the burgundy and gold, but you've also already lost so many fans the last 20 years, and the Ravens have been good, and you've got the proximity in Maryland, and it's like, well, hey, if the team is, yeah, sure, we're a DC suburb, and we root for the Nats and the Wizards and the Caps, but Baltimore's just as close to me as Loudoun County, so why would I root for the Commanders over the Ravens when the Ravens are a model NFL franchise and have been for 20 years, and I really like that Lamar Jackson guy? And I think that's the kind of thing that the ownership group probably is thinking about. Like, how do we centralize it or maybe keep a foothold in Virginia with a practice facility and the stadium in Maryland so that we can try to keep the DMV together? You muted.
Hold up.
All right,
it's not a bad point, but that's exactly what the price of doing business is in the NFL. Like, sorry, you know what I'm saying? Like, you knew that when you bought the team. And I'm not saying that should disqualify you from trying to keep the team, but if it turns out in practice that the best cost-benefit analysis for the football team is to build a stadium in Virginia, you should build a stadium in Virginia and just make sure that you have a product that people like. You've already lost a generation of fans to the Ravens. I know that because my own kid brother, who's 20 years old, is a Ravens fan. You know what I'm saying? And, like, I just feel that there are some concessions that you're going to have to assume because it's not like you're starting over from when Dan Snyder bought the team. You are not going back to the 90s and all of a sudden a restart. You are still going to be dealing with the generational issues that were brought up as a result of, again, fan retention, other teams in other markets that are close by, as well as generalized views on what people think the value of an NFL venue is in their towns. That you can't put that toothpaste back into the tube. And so ideally there are certain concepts that I think we would want to tackle, but practically it's just not the same thing in 2023.
Yeah, I hadn't really considered this because I think I've been caught up in the RFK thing, but like we had Siciliano on Wednesday, I think, and he obviously grew up here, same thing, Reston kid, who now has the perspective of working at NFL Network and traveling around the country, and still is very tied here, though. Most of his family's still here, et cetera. And he just goes, man, like, the RFK thing would be cool, but if they build a stadium on the moon and the product's good, people will show up. And I just hadn't heard someone say that. And, as much as we'll take calls and people will say that that's crazy, and, like, if they move the team to X, then I'm out. No, you're not. Like, if you've stuck with it this long through all the crap that Snyder put you through and Bruce Allen and the rest of the buffoonery that got this place nicknamed Ashburnistan, which we have now retired, I don't think having to drive a little bit extra when you go to the games, and sure, there are people that might go to every game now that might start watching a lot more on television, but I think that you'll probably wind up watching on television versus going. And that would be the change versus not rooting for the team at all. Right.
And to your example about the Cowboys, that's also in Dallas, man. You've lived in Dallas. I've been to Dallas plenty. That's just a completely different layout of life in terms of the space around everything. Stadium's in Arlington, and the facility is in Frisco. Like, there's just not that kind of room to operate in the same way within the similar jurisdictions in D.C. And so, yeah, there's certain ideas you can take from certain places, but this is going to be a bespoke example because of the fact that there are 3 literal actual jurisdictions in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia that you're serving. This becomes an, in fact, complex problem that, if they're not prepared to work together, which was kind of always the whole deal. Snyder wanted to pit everybody against each other because they were the big draw. I don't think that can be the way that you do this. I think you've got to find a way to bring together a coalition of human beings from Maryland, D.C., and Virginia as a way to make this work and serve out everybody's best interest, as opposed to just opening up the coffers and saying, well, whoever convinces me is where we're going. That doesn't strike me as smart these days.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting. Like, Youngkin was at practice yesterday, governor of Virginia, and he's in office for a couple more years, so he will be the one ultimately deciding from the executive level in Virginia. Right. Wes Moore, who just took office recently, like, he's been very vocal that he wants the team to stay in PG County. And then obviously Bowser this morning on the Junkies and other places she's spoken, like, they all want the team. Suddenly, Josh Harris, hey, man, open for business. They all want to visit for Magic Johnson. Who wouldn't? And so
very true.
We'll see where that goes. Clint Yates with us here on the Hoffman Show. Again, the major breaking news, Ashburnistan has officially been retired. That's a term. Real quick, though, on the way out, I know you've spent most of your week out there in L.A. following this story. Shohei Ohtani's going to stay with the Angels, and after you see how he pitched the other day, a one-hit shutout in late July, who does that? Why would you ever trade that guy? Well, he's going to be a free agent, but what do you make of the decision, and ultimately, what does the offseason look like for him?
It was a two-parter for me. Number one was the fact that the way that they stated that he was going to be staying was by claiming that he was off the trade market, whilst never having claimed he was technically on the trade market, as in we didn't see any of those offers. We didn't even hear any leaked. As you know, typically in these kind of negotiations, one team will say, oh, yeah, well, this is what we offered, just to kind of assuage their fan base to let them know they gave it a shot. Or even the team with the player will say, oh, look at that craptastic thing that they offered. How dare they? You know what I'm saying? As a way to sort of gain some ground in the negotiations. None of that happened. It was just, oh, no, he's staying. He's off the trade market. And I was like, oh, okay. That was actually quite refreshing to me from an Angels team that said, yeah, he's Shohei Ohtani. Of course we're going to stick with him. We've got an outside shot at the playoffs. Matter of fact, we bringing some more people in, you know what I'm saying, so we can actually make a run. And I think ultimately that was the most prudent decision for Artie Moreno, because there's this notion of, oh, you can't just let him walk for nothing. It's not for nothing. He's on the team. He's playing in front of a crowd that enjoys watching him play, and he does it well. There's no for nothing in that scenario. And that game yesterday, man, bro, so I'm sitting around the apartment. I turn on the game, 10 o'clock start out here. I'm thinking, all right, Shohei's throwing against the Tigers. No big deal. Get to the third or fourth. I'm doing some things around the house. He's still on the mound. Tigers still have no runs, and the Halos do. Gets to the fourth, gets to the fifth and sixth. He's still on the mound. Tigers still have no runs. He gets to the seventh, and I'm like, what is he still doing here? You know what I'm saying? Like, I said, let me just watch this. And then I was like, wow, he legitimately just threw a complete game. And just on my basic memory, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen him do that before. It was his first one ever. And so one hits them on the road, turns around as a DH, hits two bombs out of the park, and then they say, yeah, he's on day-to-day with some muscle tightness. You don't say. You don't say that a guy who hit two homers and threw a one-hitter is a little tight in the muscles after that. It's just, there's nothing to say, Craig. The performances you're seeing out of him are something that we've never seen before in Major League Baseball. And I'm glad that the Angels fans who committed to this for 6 seasons finally get the payoff throughout the end of the year.
Is there any chance he stays, though?
I think the best chance that he stays is pretty simple. If they go to the playoffs and they make a little bit of a run, and that's entirely possible. It's not, listen, the Phillies last year were the last team in the playoffs and went to the World Series. If something like that happens, I could very much see a world in which he stays because, competition matters, man. People just assume that, oh, well, he would want to go to the Dodgers because they're the most winningest franchise year to year, or, the Yankees or whatever. And I'm like, how about the team that wins most recently is most likely the better team? You know what I'm saying? That's something to keep in mind,
Sure.
When you're thinking about where guys want to go, especially guys that aren't Americans, that don't have this long filtered notion of greatness through whatever concepts of the franchises that we believe, because we grew up watching them in a different kind of way than other people did. I just hope that he makes a choice that ultimately makes him happy to play baseball, because his sort of joie de vivre when he's on the field is the fun part beyond the skill. Everybody likes him. And to see him go to a team where it became only about winning or only about what he was doing in order to sort of, get a team back to what their level was supposed to be, I don't actually care about that. The Shohei Ohtani show is enough in itself, in my personal opinion, to entertain me for the rest of his career.
Yeah, he's also going to care about the check. So we'll see who offers the biggest check. That tends to be influential, no matter where someone is from, how much they care about winning. The money talks. All right, Clinton Yates, on Around the Horn, weekly on ESPN. You can also read his work at ESPN.com and Anscape. And if you want more Ohtani talk, ESPN LA, you can catch him there as well. And then you can catch him next Friday here on the Hoffman Show, because that's what we do.
Exactly. All right, Gregory, have a great weekend, sir.
You too. Thanks, buddy. See ya.
Hey, this is DA, and you're listening to The Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, we got to quickly update the folks watching on the stream because sometimes we don't carry what's trending on the stream. We just go to commercial on the stream, and then you just hear it if you're on the radio. And while we were doing what's trending, following the interview with Clinton Yates, we both picked up points on the fine board. Just a disastrous, the most calamitous what's trending in the history of at least this show, which is saying something because we've had some bad what's trending. We do a good job on this show. That's not always our best. Sometimes it sneaks up on us. Sometimes it somehow sneaks up on me all 3 hours of the show, which is a finable offense, as you know. This is what it is. But it might be the worst in the history of the station.
You might be on something.
It's not a badge we wear proudly, but
Nope.
It's one we currently wear. And thus, as the folks on the stream can see, we've updated the fine board. We had some extra fines this week. I've also moved it again. I like the current location way better. I think that we have finally found the final resting place for the fine board. But I now have 30 points in fines. You have 15. We are at 45 total fine points. Again, if you're new and you have no idea what we're talking about, we have a fine system on the show. We instituted it about 10 days ago, and we're already racking up the points. Once we get to 100 points, we then take the percentage of that 100. So right now, let's say we finish it at 60-30, I guess 65-35. We buy ourselves lunch. I pay for 65% of it. Anthony pays for 35%. And then the points start over. So right now Anthony, we're almost halfway to buying ourselves lunch. We need to get to 100. We got 45 points on the board already.
You sound too excited about that.
Yeah, no, I'm not. That's excitement / fear.
Oh, okay.
Because this is going to get expensive quickly if we pick up fines at this rate. This was supposed to be an accountability measure.
Yeah.
And it hasn't slowed us down. Really, all we've done is just discover how much, that's, I guess the first step of the accountability measure is this, we actually understand how much stuff we do wrong now.
Mm-hmm.
Damn.
Yep.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. Sorry we're not better. We're working on it. I think we do an entertaining show. Lebitard has a saying with his show that I think is true with radio, which is when you're good, be good. When you're bad, be really good. And I think we embrace that here. I think that's the point, and thus the fines, they rack up. But hey, it's entertainment, kids. It's entertainment. Speaking of entertainment, weekend preview time, still brought to you by nobody. Anthony, you get to start our weekend preview because there's a big old fight tonight that you are excited about, sir.
It is tomorrow. Tonight
Tomorrow night.
I will be at Drake.
That's right. Wait, you told me yesterday that it was tonight. You had your days backwards.
Oh, maybe I did. I know Drake is tonight, though.
Yeah, fight's tomorrow. Okay.
But however,
I was like, Friday night fight? Sure. This ain't a fight that's typically on a Friday, but I trust my guy.
Saturday night, baby.
Mm-hmm.
History will be made for the first time in the 4-belt era. There will be an undisputed welterweight champion crowned. We have 2 unbeaten champions, Craig. We have one by the name of Errol the Truth Spence, who is 28-0 with 22 knockouts.
Okay.
And he will be facing Terrence Bud Crawford, who is 39-0 with 30 knockouts. These two dudes, peak of their powers, peak of their prime. I think tomorrow night on Showtime pay-per-view, shout out them.
Because they need it.
Yes. This will be a crazy fight. I'm pretty sure you've seen everybody, talking about it. It's been all over TV. If you watch anything on Showtime, you've seen it. If you go to Dave & Buster's, you've seen it. If you've seen it at the sports bars, they've had these signs up down in Capital One. They have the signs up. Epic fight. This will go down as one of the best fights of our generation, Craig.
What's your prediction for it?
My prediction is that it will go the distance, and Errol the Truth Spence will be the first undisputed welterweight champion to ever hold 4 belts. I think he wins on points.
Okay.
That is my prediction. It will go the distance. I don't think there will be a knockout. A lot of people are predicting a knockout. Vegas has Terrence Crawford winning. But I, on the other hand, have Errol the Truth Spence winning. He's too big, and I think he's going to make Bud look like he is, too small.
Oh.
He's light in the arse, as some people would say.
Those people typically don't include you.
You're right. But I'm excited for this fight. This fight has been brewing for like 5 years. Everybody's been talking about when will Bud face Spence.
Anthony, you said arse.
Yes. Arse. I mean, I could say ass, but you know.
Right on, mate. Just
I took one out of your book, man.
cheerio.
Yes.
Light in the arse.
Yes.
Right
He
on,
is, man.
All right. Didn't see that analysis coming.
Yes.
Keep me on my toes.
I got you,
Good
man.
good thing for boxing. Got to bounce, float like a butterfly.
Sting like a bee, baby.
Yeah. Some guy was pretty good said that.
Yeah.
All right. So get that. See your reaction. Get your breakdown and all its fantastic analysis, just like that. Light in the arse. On Monday in the weekend review. What else happened this weekend segment? So looking forward to that. Other than that, this weekend, we are still waiting, by the way, on DC United to make a final decision on Taxi Fountas. So that is something to watch as they, I do believe, play this weekend. Spirit tonight are at Audi Field, 7 o'clock. If you're looking for something to do tonight, get out the house. It's hot, but so make sure that you hydrate, please. But Audi Field versus Gotham, 7 o'clock tonight. Should be good. Two of the absolute best players in the U.S. who were not on the World Cup team playing head-to-head. You got Ashley Hatch, of course, for the Spirit. And then you got, and by the way, a League Cup game tomorrow for DC United, 9 o'clock at Audi against Pumas UNAM. So you got Ashley Hatch versus Midge Purse. Midge, a Silver Spring native, plays for Gotham, so should be a fun one tonight at Audi. F1 this weekend, last race before the summer break. They are at Spa, which is in Belgium Grand Prix, and pretty controversial, Anthony. This is and seriously controversial. This is a track that has claimed the lives of multiple drivers in F2 over the last couple of years, including one just a couple of weeks ago. And there's these very, very high-speed corners. There's these two kind of blind uphill segments, and drivers have lost control and ultimately crashed. And like, it is, F1 cars are so incredibly safe considering the speeds that we're talking about, the fact that they are open at the top. And yet, despite all those safety mechanisms, you've had multiple drivers have serious injuries, and at least two that I can think of, that have lost their lives at Spa. And it is going to rain this weekend, making things very perilous. A lot of drivers went off in practice this morning. It's also a sprint weekend, so there's less practice time. F1 is the last couple of years done these sprint races where there's like kind of a short race earlier in the weekend, and instead of 3 practices qualifying and then the race, you have 1 practice, 1 qualifying, and then sprint shootout, sprint race, so like a qualifying for the sprint, and then the sprint itself, and then the Grand Prix on Sunday. And like, drivers have been very, very clear to the FIA, which is the governing body, to basically be like, if this thing gets dangerous, you better pull us off the track. Like, do not put us in peril. And it is supposed to rain, so it could be a very, very interesting weekend in Belgium. Also, Max Verstappen, who is by far and away the leader of the championship on the driver's side, Red Bull, his team, leading the team chase, the constructors, by miles and miles. Verstappen has won, Red Bull's won 12 races in a row. I think Verstappen's at 7, but he changed his gearbox for the 5th time this season. You're only allowed 4, so he will take a 5-place grid penalty and not actually start on pole position for once. Actually, 2nd weekend in a row after Lewis Hamilton took it last weekend. So should be interesting to watch. Sunday morning, 9 a.m. is the Belgian Grand Prix. All the sprint stuff is tomorrow. That is the weekend preview. Nats are in New York taking on the Mets. Anything else, Anthony, that we should mention? We got the soccer, we got the racing, we got the baseball. got the
Commanders.
boxing.
It's going to be a huge day out there.
Yeah, no, that is true. We typically talk about that for like the entire rest of the show, which means next we're going to continue to talk. I mean, no, you're not wrong, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth with the one and only Ben Standig next. He joins us for Not My Beat. Then we're talking about Mayor Bowser's interview on the Junks this morning at 5:30. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
The Team 980.
It is time now, 5 o'clock each and every day, for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Ben Standig with us from The Athletic. He's out there scorching. Ben, you hydrate? Feeling all right after that nasty day y'all had to watch practice at?
No. If there's a injury report for reporters for the next day, mine would definitely be questionable. Reason being dehydration / life choices. It was a rough one today. I'm not gonna lie. For me, and granted, I did nothing but stand and watch people do things, but it was really hot.
Yeah, we gotta get you some fluids, gotta get you some electrolytes, gotta get you some salt. Never forget the salt. The sodium is very, very key. I'm just trying to help you out, man.
Look, anything you want to tell me, I am definitely listening. This is not fun this afternoon, so I'll take all the advice I can get.
All right, well, at least try to get your mind off it by talking about football, which is fun theoretically. So we make a joke about the Open of like, hey, this team not making a lot of magic. Hopefully, we can have some fun with it. But realistically, like seeing the fan turnout the last couple of days. Did we somehow underestimate the impact that getting away from Dan Snyder and to Josh Harris would have?
By the way, like before you even said anything, when I heard the intro, I was like, that does seem kind of like dated almost. I don't know if we did. I mean, I think the thing that was so interesting is the timing. Like we have focused on the timing of this from the perspective of, okay, so when Josh Harris comes in, no matter what, even if he wanted to make changes with the coaching staff or whatever, there's nothing really he can do. Training camp is here. The rookies literally reported to camp the day of Harris's Friday press conference at FedEx Field. So I think that's what's so interesting, right? There was no gap at all between the sale and this team being back together and being a public utility almost for the local fan base. So it really dovetailed nicely. It's like, if you had New Year's Eve and then you celebrate and then you wake up and it's the Super Bowl. Like there was no gap. So I mean, look, obviously people are excited and all that, but I just think also they were excited, and the next day or the next few days they had a chance to openly show their excitement by showing up to practices and things like that. So I don't know if we underestimated it, but I think it was a perfect way for people to express themselves, directly into the football when this happened.
I hear you, but they got almost 3,000 people on a Thursday at 9 a.m. for a practice and then followed it up with, I'm guessing it looked, at least from what I could see on Twitter, to be basically just as full today. I don't know how many people are going to show up tomorrow. And like, I guess what I'm asking here, Ben, is like, when we get to the season, Jason Wright has already told us that the Cardinals game is almost sold out. Whether how close to is close, of course, that's a classic sales mechanism, and Jason's job ultimately is to sell. And that's not me like taking a shot at Jason. Like we just don't know. If you do have that data, by all means share. But I do wonder, like week 3 against Buffalo, that second home game, like is the stadium still going to be pretty full of burgundy and gold? Is this going to sustain, considering the tremendous outpouring of support we have seen already for practice?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that's a huge key. Look, I think in general, I think we know this being on social media, right, where like it's not always the majority opinion that we're hearing. It's often the loud minority voices. And I'm not saying this is a minority voice. 100% of the people are thrilled that Dan Snyder is gone and anybody else is in his place. But in this case, Josh Harris looks to be like a pretty good option. I think tomorrow is going to be a pretty interesting opportunity to show exactly what we're talking about. They've distributed at the team at least 10,000 tickets for Saturday's practice.
Wait, you said 10,000?
That's what we were told, yeah.
Holy crap. I was expecting like 5, 6, maybe. 10,000.
Right. So obviously we'll see. I don't know how many people are coming, but if they get anything even north of 5,000 is going to be really notable there. I mean, like it's as many people have been there. Like the stands today, I thought were a bit less crowded than they were yesterday. I can't keep track of how many people were milling about at looking at the food options or seeking shade themselves, things like that. But yeah, tomorrow's going to be fascinating. I mean, I've been getting there about 7:30 each day for a 9 a.m. practice, and the line outside today of fans when I got there was definitely longer than it was the day before. And tomorrow, if we're getting double the people at least, it should be significantly longer. So yeah, I mean, I think tomorrow's gonna be a really interesting gauge of where things are at. But there's no question whether people show up for week one in that way or not. Everybody is thrilled. Now it's just a matter of how quickly do you get these people to go from being completely disengaged to ticket buying fans again. That could take some time, but maybe not. Maybe maybe that's what we'll ultimately see. How these things have changed.
Yeah, no, I mean, when people have had the chance to show up so far, whether it's the party that we threw obviously on last Thursday, or whether it's camp so far, people have shown up. So we'll see how that parlays at FedEx Field. Ben Standing with us here on the Hoffman Show, of course, Commanders beat reporter for The Athletic. Okay, on the field today, Ben, what was the biggest storyline? What was the thing that you as you head back to the media tent and prepare to ask everybody questions, what did you want to ask about?
Yeah, well, I mean, perhaps it was in part because of who was going to be available to us today. But, I think the running backs have been pretty fun to watch so far. Look, Antonio Gibson, we know, is just a completely versatile option who can do so many different things. And with the enemy starting back in minicamp, we really started seeing them use these running backs more, the passing game, down the field, things like that. I think Brian Robinson's all-around game, look, obviously his story last year took an unwanted turn, no doubt, and that became sort of the focal point for him. And then when he returned, it was him just as this sort of battering ram up the middle. But he really also is a much more versatile piece, I think, than people give him credit for. His ability to catch some passes, we've seen that, and that happened again today. And so I think that is – again, maybe it's not the number one story, but, obviously Sam Howell probably is, but every day. But, I think those guys really continue for me to stand out what they're capable of doing. And so when we talk about the playmakers, that we start probably with Terry McLaurin and Dotson and Curtis Samuel and that group. But, the running backs, I think, are really going to be a lot of fun. I think, of course, I say the running backs, we don't really see them run a lot, though, at this stage. And next week when they put the pads on is where things really, for me, are going to get interesting. I mean, that's obvious if you're aware how training camp works, but for these running backs in particular, how are they going to flow with this offensive line? That's got some questions. But yeah, I think those guys to me kind of stood out today. Cam Curl had an interception, a really nice break on a pass to make a play. So that was one of the defensive plays. That's me. In addition to Daron Payne, being out there, he had missed the first 2 days with a toe injury. He was back out there today as well.
I know that Howell threw that pick to Curl, and then from what I saw, he followed it up with a pretty nice deep ball to De'Ami Brown. What did you make of Howell's day, the good, the bad, and also the context that Ron Rivera put it in afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's always tricky. Like when we're tweeting from the sidelines, I really haven't been much the last few days, partly because of the heat, but partly just I'm trying to not focus too much on Twitter because I'll get distracted with what I'm doing. But, there are times where if you just show the good Sam Howell stuff, you're going to be mega excited. The deep ball is really nice. He's got zip on the passes. We can see the mobility, all that stuff. But then there's the inconsistency with some of the throws. It's a little bit harder to tell if there's inconsistency with the reads because, we're watching field level. We're not seeing tape, things like that. So you won't see the whole field, not to mention the defense isn't really game planning or anything. But, I think it continues to be encouraging signs in part because of the low bar that's been set in front of him, but also, like I said, the arm strength, the accuracy. I mean, all of that is pretty legit. So it's just going to be a matter of right now, fine-tuning things and moving forward, putting, put one day on top of the other, not to sound overly cliche, but that is the key for a young quarterback who, he said he's got command of the offense. I don't doubt that. And, I think he looked pretty good. I think generally, like Rivera has been, I would probably say, kind of downplaying Howell a little bit. And whatever he's asked about Howell, he immediately follows up with whatever he says about Howell. He says the same thing about Brissett and Jake Fromm. Not again, there's no competition per se. Brissett's in the mix if Howell falters, but I think Rivera's trying to temper expectations a little bit, but also, and again, in part because we'll see. It's still Sam Howell is the biggest mystery out here, without a question.
Ben Standig with us from The Athletic here on the Hoffman Show. I've noticed he's done the same thing with the running backs. Do you think that's because there will be a more even distribution of snaps between Robinson and Gibson, especially than maybe we thought, where like Robinson is the starter, Gibson is the backup, and kind of has this niche role? Or is that just Ron being kind of, I don't want to say a politician, but like trying to spread the love and, keep some air of mystery that coaches like to do this time of year?
Yeah, I mean, look, if we believe that like we're just going to sort of take what the Chiefs did, and then bring it here, they had some good backs out, some interesting backs in Isaiah Pacheco and Jared McKinnon, but I don't know that either one of them was like some, getting a massive. It was a one-sided distribution to one guy over the other. I think they were pretty good about spreading the wealth there. So I think to that extent, that could happen here. It's been several months now since we were all obsessed with the notion of how run-heavy, run-focused is this offense going to be, to now we're settling in more and focusing on the quarterback throwing the ball. But, I think that mentality of still sort of, again, run first, run heavy, but not like this isn't the wishbone like from the 1980s Oklahoma or Nebraska games. So I think there is still a lot to be said for these two running backs in particular to being a really, really big part of this offense, a really big focal point to help try to take the pressure off of Hal, but also they've got some good playmaking potential themselves. Again, the top three receivers, these two running backs, if you sort of want to lump Logan Thomas / Cole Turner together, I mean, it's a pretty good group, and they give their young quarterback weapons. So I think they're going to be heavily involved. Look, if there's games where they're winning into the fourth quarter, Brian Robinson probably dominates the touches. If it's more competitive games or they're trailing, those are games where probably Gibson gets more involved. So, I think they like them both, and I think the game situations will ultimately probably dictate how much either one is getting the ball.
I know Rivera was asked about the tight ends today, and he liked what he's seen so far. Have any of them stood out to you in any kind of way, good or bad, so far?
They don't have tall receivers. They've got really good ones. They don't have tall ones. And when you see when Hal's throwing the ball to Logan Thomas, who's like, 6'6", and Cole Turner is even a little bit taller than that, that size really stands out.
Every time Logan Thomas walks by me, I can't believe how tall he is. I don't know why. Like, that's just a fact my brain won't accept, that he is a giant human. But that is a tall, tall man.
It's probably because he used to play quarterback, right? I mean,
Maybe.
Obviously some quarterbacks are tall, but they're typically not that tall. I think that stands out. But Cole Turner, when the ball gets in his direction and he can get his hands on it, he seems to pretty much pull it in, whether that's high over his head or a little bit closer to his waist. He's really he's been really reliable, and it's basically been a year, right, since we've seen Cole Turner be that kind of a guy. He got hurt last summer after he looked really impressive early in the offseason and never truly recovered, certainly not as a pass catcher. But we're seeing that unfold now. So I think that, like, to me, that's beyond whatever the offensive line does. I think what they get out of the tight end position is the big X factor. If those guys are able to be red zone threats, safety valve for Hal, or I kind of wonder, is there a world where they don't keep any tall receivers and Cole Turner ends up sort of lining outside a bit as that guy? That could be another fun way to use him. So I don't want to cop out, keep saying I don't know what this is going to be, but there's still a bit of a mystery as to see how these guys evolve. But I've been impressed with Cole Turner once again for a second straight summer.
Yeah, we're 3 days into camp. We don't know anything. That's the silly part about doing a radio show this time of year, or a podcast, or writing about anything. We can only say what we see and acknowledge that it is 3 days worth of data, and they haven't put football pads on yet. So I hear you. Yet, I'm going to ask you more questions because the show doesn't fill itself, Ben. The show doesn't fill itself. Ben Standig's with us here on the Hoffman Show. One thing I think actually you can put a little more weight in, and like, look, even on the tight end stuff, you say what you see, and it'll evolve as it goes as we get more data points. That's the nature of this thing. One thing that I do think is pretty interesting, though, is how they've rotated the defensive backs. And I don't know whether it's just kind of cross-training where they're getting everybody reps or preparing in case of emergency situations, or they don't truly know yet how they're going to align everybody. But how do they rotate them today after we saw a fair bit of rotation on days 1 and 2?
Yeah, like Kendall Fuller at outside corner is one constant in terms of the cornerbacks. But after that, it's kind of moving around. There will be some series of downs where there will be, Fuller with St. Juste opposite him, just like it was last year on the outside, with Rashad Wildgoose in the slot, who, they're using him a little bit more Wildgoose than I would have thought after how last year ended, but okay. But then, the next series, it'll be Emmanuel Forbes back on the field, moving St. Juste inside with Fuller the opposite on the outside. And I think, that sort of how often they want to use the three-corner look versus, I'm sort of waiting for Quan Martin to be a little more involved with the ones. Maybe I just missed it, but I didn't see a ton today. But, how often are they going to feel comfortable with the three corners where St. Juste is inside versus wanting him to play more outside than somebody else getting involved? I think Forbes is going to play a ton. Don't get me wrong. I think he probably starts. I think he's really good. But St. Juste was, pretty good last year on the outside when given that opportunity. And there's got to be a feeling of, man, we really like having the 6'3" player who's always around the ball, available to us there. So I think they're probably still trying to figure out how often do they want to use their best three corners together versus, how often do they feel they need to have a different type of look besides that.
And then the other rotation spot that I think is pretty interesting so far in camp is a linebacker. We know Jamin Davis is getting up to speed. We also know there's no pads on yet. They haven't run any of the Cinco front, where he was obviously effective behind the 5 defensive linemen last year, and it's because they haven't done anything in pads yet. But how did Jamin look today after he had a bit of a mixed bag, including giving up a touchdown in pass coverage yesterday?
Yeah. So they did use that 5-man defensive line look a bit today with Fedarian Mathis, that extra. And at times it was Jamin Davis as the solo. Sometimes it was Cody Barton as the solo. And, I think, again, they're just trying to show off their different looks. And, so much of any kind of planning is, how do we maximize our talent, right? And they've obviously got these 5 defensive linemen. I'm not saying there's not more than that, but, the obvious 4 plus the second-round pick from last year. So getting that guy out of the field. And, I think Jamin Davis working his way back into, peak physical condition is going to be big. I think that, look, Chase Young is an obvious X factor because he wasn't basically playing last year. And, what can he do to add to a top 10 defense? But I still think Jamin Davis to me is just as much of an X factor because, he made strides last year, but can he really take full advantage of his physical talents to become a playmaker, whether that's being more of a rusher or playing more around the line of scrimmage or, stepping up in coverage? He is the clear linebacker potential difference maker they have. I think Barton, though, has started to show more and more. He had an interception today. I think it was a Jacoby Brissett pass. He's got some, pretty good speed and quickness. So, I think those two still project to be the starters. I'm not saying that's breaking news or anything, but, there's more defensive linemen and more defensive backs than they probably have slots for. And one way to get them on the field is to take a linebacker off. So I think that's going to be really fun to watch is do Barton and Davis show enough to keep them both together on the field, or do the Jack Del Rio want to, go to as many, 5 defensive lines, 5 or 6 defensive backs look as possible.
That is a very, very, very good point. All right, sir. Here's your assignment now. Water, electrolytes, salt. Gotta get you feeling good because you got another big day tomorrow.
Oh my Lord! All right, I'm in. I'm gonna look for. Hoping I got one Gatorade stuck somewhere in the back of the refrigerator. Let's reach for that when I go back downstairs.
Yeah. So I know if you can muster the power to, or if you don't and you have to go out, they got a new product called Gator Light that kind of has all of that. There's some other stuff I can text you that also works, but I appreciate you powering through this segment. You were very, very good. High grades on this assignment. We got to make sure you're ready to go tomorrow. That is the nature of training camp. Just surviving today is not enough, Ben.
I feel like you're like my cut man. I'm just coming back to the corner, and you're like telling me what I got to do to go back out there. All right, I appreciate the motivation.
You got it. I'm here for you. All right, Ben Standig, everybody. Go listen to his podcast and read his work because he's clearly working very hard for you. See you, Ben.
All right, man. See you.
All right, Ben Standig, of course, from The Athletic. You can catch his work there and the Standing Room Only podcast as well. And Anthony, I had an idea while talking to Ben and thinking about some of this stuff. We had a bit of a hole in the show at 6:30, where we had some ideas. We weren't in love with any of them. I want to do a 53-man roster projection at 6:30 after 3 days of camp, and then I want to be able to go back. Like I want to do it again. Let's say like before the Baltimore practices or something, halfway through camp, and then we'll do one obviously right before they make the cut. And I want to see, A, how much it changes, and B, how much it changes, B, how accurate it is. So, roster projection at 6:30?
That's good.
Okay. All right, cool. That's the plan. Coming up at 6, our training camp pick 6 at 6, the 6 most interesting things from the day from the Commanders' practice in Ashburn. Lots of interesting things said at the podium again, so lots of sound. You'll hear from Rivera, Brian Robinson, and more. But coming up next, Mayor Bowser, Muriel Bowser, of course, the mayor of Washington, D.C., was on this radio station this morning with the Sports Junkies and had some very, very interesting things to say. A lot to unpack about the potential for the Commanders at RFK. We will play some sound bites for you and react to them next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, live on YouTube at the Team 980, and always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
DC has a
you look at the time, we're halfway done on a Friday on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live on the free Odyssey app. This morning on this very radio station, the Sports Junkies had Mayor Muriel Bowser of Washington, D.C. on to discuss what you'd expect her to discuss. The fact that the Commanders eventually, as soon as humanly possible, are going to need a new stadium, and she is over one of the 3 jurisdictions that could grant them land to do just that. There are a million questions when it comes to this stadium. Who's going to pay for it? Where is it going to be? Who gets a say in such things? Is this something that the federal government is involved in, especially in D.C.? Is this something that taxpayers are voting on the financial side of it? Or is it something like in Virginia? I think there are mechanisms to just do it and not even ask taxpayers if this is the thing that they want, other than the fact that obviously whatever politicians do gets them voted either back in office or not. And that is an issue that some voters might consider. So there is a lot of factors here. The spiritual home of the team, if you will, in RFK. And Mayor Bowser touched directly or indirectly on a lot of it. Bottom line for her, though, she thinks that RFK, where the stadium was for decades and decades and decades through the glory days, is the best spot for the Washington Commanders to be.
This is how we start. We want our team, but we also know we have a great site, and we believe we have the best site. Best served by transportation, best served by public transportation. And I think the lure of history is something that counts. And I don't know what dollar amount I put on it, but it counts. Mm-hmm. In my experience with people who have built great businesses, especially in taking over a team that needed to be rescued, they care about that. And they care about the legacy that they leave on sport and in an area.
So that question, to even add more context, the question she was answering was one from, I believe, Jason, it might have been EB, about the fact that DC is very unlikely, this is my words, not hers or his, but DC is very unlikely to be able to offer the same kind of public money that Virginia will. Obviously, there's a leaked prospectus from Seth Wickersham at ESPN a couple of months ago at this point that the Harris Group thought they might be able to get as much as $1 billion in public funding in one way or another. And there's no way in hell that's happening in D.C. I don't even know if directly for the stadium, D.C. will give a dime. What D.C. very likely would do is invest in the infrastructure around the stadium and obviously a lot of other things around the stadium, even if they leave the stadium itself to Josh Harris and anyone else in his ownership group that is going to fund it. The NFL does have money that they give from a certain fund for owners to build stadiums. So there are ways to get the financing done, even for a guy who just spent $6.05 billion along with his partners on this football team. But I do think when you talk about the calculation, the sheer numbers, Mayor Bowser brings up a very good point, which is the money up front is only part of this. There is something to be said for being at the spiritual home of the team, being at a place where fans enjoy going and going in and out. And another answer that we won't play for you, of course, you can hear the whole interview by rewinding in the free Odyssey app or checking out on the Junkies podcast page, the interview. It is posted not only when it aired in the hour, but as a separate interview. So very easy to find. Even if you just search Mayor Bowser in your podcast app, you can find the full interview. I know because that's how I listen to it. But she says, like, fans anecdotally don't want to go to these suburban stadiums. They don't want to go and have to drive a long way and then sit in a parking lot because there's nothing else to do, and that's where they tailgate. Like, obviously, some fans want to do that, but a lot don't, and then you're just kind of stuck there. They'd much rather go to these urban type of stadiums where there's things to do. For instance, tonight, if you're coming down to Navy Yard and want to go to the Spirit game at Audi Field, or you go to a DC United game or a DC Defenders game there, or a Nats game in Navy Yard, obviously, like, you can go to dinner at any number of restaurants go to the game. You can go out afterwards, and you are all in the same area, as opposed to, hey, our entire day is spent going to and from this suburban stadium that is merely surrounded by asphalt and parking lots. And I think that is a compelling case. And for a franchise and an ownership group that has prioritized fan experience, that is something to consider. Again, is it enough to make up $1 billion funding deficit? Hell no. Hell no. But it is worth some amount of money in the long term for sure. There was a question about whether or not RFK is a big enough site. It is a massive, massive area, but is it big enough for the footprint of not just the football stadium, but all the other things they want to do around it? Here was Mayor Bowser.
Of course it is. It's 190 acres. Anybody's been on the site, they're not going to double the size of the current stadium because we have to remember a football team played there. Our football team played there for many years. Mm-hmm. And you won't need to, in like a lot of the suburban sites that aren't served by public transportation or sitting right on the highway exchange, you won't need to build all that parking. And that's how you get a real urban feeling stadium, which is what people want. People don't want to go out to campus with miles and miles of parking after they sit on the highway for an hour and a half to get there. So they want to get to the game, enjoy the game, and have the feel of being in a great urban stadium. They can look out and see the capital of the United States. They'll look the other way and see the Anacostia River. But having said all that, that's going to be true for the $60 million local sportsplex that we build for D.C. that's already funded. That's going to be true for people who come down to the campus just to have better access to the Anacostia River and have restaurants and dining and entertainment. So we think that the site has it all.
That's a 5-point penalty, 5-point fine for me because I didn't think that the hey, they want urban stadiums part was in that bite, and I said that you weren't going to hear it. But there you go. I told you. She said it. There you go. And I agree. Like that site has enough room for everything. But there are other factors here, and 10 game days a year, plus all the other events. What happens in the neighborhood? Is there enough to justify enough good things besides the stadium to justify the amount of traffic that will come into a neighborhood for the residents that already live in that area? Nevertheless, the new ones that would live if you built new housing near RFK, if you revitalize the stadium at that site. What else is happening, obviously, at RFK and at the surrounding areas besides the football games? And that is something that Bowser and her team have certainly thought of.
I don't know that the Philadelphia model is what we want.
Okay.
Keep in mind, Josh is involved in Philadelphia right now, and he's trying to move the stadium to downtown Philadelphia. I mean, I just don't think that's the movement for a lot of places. We don't want a lot of asphalt parking and only one use. We want vibrancy, and we think that comes when you have the campus brought to life on days where there isn't a game. So having a multiple use is a high priority for us. Now, Poplar Point is just across the river, and we are continuing to work with our partners at Park Service to get that kind of free and clear. Now, I don't know that that's the best place for a football stadium, but we do think that it could accommodate more sport and recreational use.
So that was one of the big newsworthy things this morning. She says Poplar Point, not the best place for a football stadium. And the Philadelphia model, for those that are unfamiliar, actually, I mean, as someone who's gone to games there, covering them, like, I love it, but I'm coming in from out of town. My wife is from Philadelphia. She generally thinks people really, really like that model specific to Philadelphia. But there is, like, the thing about the Philadelphia model that works is the location. The idea of 3 stadiums in one area right off the highway with public transportation doesn't have to be the Philadelphia model of 3 stadiums and thus a ton of parking. The part of the Philadelphia model that I think people love is the accessibility. And could that be done with the more vibrant mixed use, not just a stadium type of plan? I think the answer is definitively yes. and it becomes kind of like Navy Yard is, where, sure, at first, most people just came down here to go to Nats games, and then ultimately DC United games across the street when Audi Field opened. But now people come down here because there's great restaurants and there's things to do and there's bars and there's, fitness and there's like all, everything that you have in every other neighborhood in DC. And if you want the version of it that is only available from the particular business that operates a Navy Yard, the shopping, the whatever, you come to Navy Yard and you go to that spot. And could RFK be that? Absolutely. But the question that Mayor Bowser did not address, something I would like to bring up next, is at what cost and for whomst is all of this for? Because that is really, really, really important, and thus we'll touch on it next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. First, a look at what's trending.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Good news from Cincinnati. Joe Burrow's relatively okay. Likely out several weeks with a calf strain, but no ligament damage, no joint damage. Just a couple of weeks with a calf strain after Joe Burrow was carted off at practice yesterday. Action tonight down in, not in Navy Yard, across the street at Audi Field. Washington Spirit hosting Gotham FC. Kickoff at 7 p.m. There is a heat advisory in effect, so if you are coming down for the game, hydrate, kiddos. Hydrate. It's good. If you're going out your door at all, drink some bleeping water. Nats do not have to deal with the D.C. heat, but it's probably hot as hell in New York. They are at the Mets tonight, 7:10 first pitch. Over on 106.7 The Fan. That is what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980.
This is DC's home.
training camp 6 at 6 coming up. The pick 6 at 6 coming up at, 6 p.m. So just a few moments from now, the biggest storylines, the most important things said from day 3 of Commanders training camp in just a few minutes. Right now, though, I want to continue diving in to the pros and cons of the RFK site based on what Muriel Bowser said this morning on the Sports Junkies as the Commanders start in earnest with Josh Harris in place, and obviously Mitchell Rales, who will play a major part in this, taking over the Commanders, and off they go. Continuing where we left off, who this is for is really important because we talk about this topic most often through the lens of the people who listen to this radio station. If you are a frequent listener, it's probably because you're a sports fan. It's probably because you're a Commanders fan. And that is who we talk to and in many ways represent the views of, right? Not necessarily you personally, but like we're talking to you and we are you in a lot of ways. Like we think of it through the lens of sports, and thus it's about the fan base and what the fan base wants. But if we take a step back, we realize that the fan base is only some percentage of the citizens of D.C. and Maryland and Virginia. And that is what the power players, whether it's Mayor Bowser, whether it's the city council, have to consider. Who is this for? Because there are inevitably neighbors in the RFK neighborhood that will be affected heavily by games being there and concerts and all the things that would happen if the stadium was built on that site, that they live right next door to each other. They get along great. One's a sports fan, one's not. One would be super excited because he's had to go or she's had to go or they've had to go with their family out to FedEx, and it sucks. And now they'll get to go to the game in their backyard. Shoot, they'll charge their friends for parking. They're going to make money off this. This is going to be awesome. Can't wait. While their neighbor, who's not a sports fan, comes over to barbecue every once a month. They're like, hell no, I don't want the traffic. I don't want the ruckus. I don't want people coming in. I like my nice little quiet neighborhood over here. That's why I purchased it. It's not in the center of the hubbub of DC. It's not fully in the suburb. It's still urban, but we don't want the craziness that you get if you live close to Gallery Place on the night where an event is happening. If you live kind of in that Mount Vernon triangle area, that's just not something that you want to be a part of, and it actually is seen as a deficit to you. So there's that balance. And then I think there's a more important point that Mayor Bowser, I think, unintentionally exposes when talking about what's happened at Gallery Place and what's happened in Navy Yard with Capital One Arena, and then decades later, Nationals Park. Here's Bowser talking about the impact on, quote unquote, the city.
We expect to have robust community engagement, and that will be decided on a local level. It has nothing to do with the federal legislation. My experience with all economic development projects, the good ones, require a lot of community engagement, push and pull to get fantastic projects, including Nats Park. People will remember, some people didn't want Nats Park. The votes at the council were 7-6 until the end. Yet we have a great stadium that has transformed that area and has poured revenues into city coffers because of how successful it has been. The advantage to RFK is there's been football there, and the transportation infrastructure is there, and it is a campus.
Anytime I hear the word coffers, that is automatically a bit of a red flag. And when you define success purely through that lens, that it's poured money into the city's coffers, we made money off of it, it's a business transaction. To me, this is Craig Hoffman, citizen of the earth, my personal opinion. I think you have failed as a public servant. because your job is only partially to look out for the finances and the business of the city. It's also to look out for the people. And this gets very, very complicated. And I want to be clear, like, Bowser did that, the thing I described as failure in that answer. I would guess if I were to had the chance to follow up with her in a way that the Junkies did not. They asked other good questions. It's not a criticism. They just went a different direction. That she would talk about this, and we certainly would love to have the mayor on the show to dive deeper into this topic. So Mayor Bowser, if you're listening, come on back here to the Team 980. But it gets complicated because if you are someone who lives in a different part of D.C. and you're going to go to the restaurants and go to the stadium and go enjoy that neighborhood, like, yeah, it is a net positive to you. But I think the most important people, when we look at this from a human perspective, the most important people when we talk about changing the fabric of a neighborhood are the ones that live there. And while there is currently no one living on the 190 acres of the RFK site, because it's a national park that hasn't been, obviously purposed for that at this time, or it's federal land that hasn't been granted to have the ability for people to live on it at this time, there are people that would be dramatically affected that are not the wealthy folks that might be affected on the other side of the stadium. And why I think that's important and why that's an important comparison to draw specifically to Nats Park is, yes, there are tons of folks who live in Navy Yard now. Every time I come into work, it feels like another apartment building has been finished. I remember when I could look out the window behind me and see a bunch of parking and a gigantic parking lot, and then we had a station parking lot that was over there out that window. If I look straight ahead through the control room of 106.7 The Fan, there used to be some parking there. Then there was that McDonald's on the corner and another lot next to it. And now literally every direction that I have pointed, I am surrounded on three sides by luxury apartment buildings. And the only reason it's not four is because Capitol Street is right there. But if they could squeeze an apartment building between the end of our building and Capitol Street, you damn well know that they would. And it would be another luxury apartment building. So you build it up. It is, quote unquote, successful for the city, but the people that were living here in Navy Yard don't get to actually reap the rewards from that. They get displaced. And this is where this gets complicated, and this is where this gets hairy. And I don't know what the solution is, because we should want to make things nicer and upgrade it, but we should also do it in a way, if we can, so that the people that have been living in a certain place that is their home get to enjoy it. Which brings us to this last bite that I want to play from Bowser from this morning on the Commanders moving to RFK and the larger repercussions it would have for the city. Because JP asked Mayor Bowser, so is this going to be a competition between D.C., Maryland, Virginia? And she actually answered in a way that I think drives home a point Clinton Yates made earlier in the program. These jurisdictions, while fighting for ultimately the stadium that is the home of the football team, need to work together to make sure something that happened recently never happens again because of what this city, Washington, D.C. is.
We don't see it as a battle. We're going to put our best foot forward because at the end of the day, we want the team, but my responsibility will be that we have a great development at RFK that benefits D.C. residents. So that's going to happen one way or the other, but we want it to happen with our big cities, great cities. They celebrate sport and they have their teams, and so we feel really strongly about making sure that we're competing around the world. And it's not just about football. There's some missed opportunities that we've had over the last year, like the World Cup. We couldn't get it because we didn't have the right stadium. They didn't want to go out to FedEx Field. Could we have a stadium that could support a Super Bowl? Could we, thinking about basketball and the investments we need to have there, we need the NBA championship and all-star game. So we want to make sure that we're competing with world capitals. We're a world capital. We shouldn't be passed over for the World Cup.
We are. We're the capital of the United States of America. And the World Cup is coming in 2026, and we're not having a game here. That's a problem. Like that is a huge issue that would literally never happen in any other country. If the World Cup went to England, they'd have 5 different stadiums in London hosting games. If it went to France, it would have multiple stadiums probably in Paris. And we can't get one game in DC, which, by the way, is one of the biggest soccer cities in America. We haven't, obviously there's a Super Bowl that should come if you build a new NFL stadium. I know she said NBA championship. That's going to involve the Wizards being better, but what she likely meant was the NCAA tournament. Haven't hosted that despite all of the college athletics around here and the passion for it, all the different alumni bases. This would be a great place for a Final Four. So many different big schools have gigantic alumni support here. Not on the radar. Why? We don't have the facilities. And so the opportunity is large. And part of the reason that you want to live in a place like DC is because those types of things are available to you. And there's got to be a balance of folks that have been here generationally, that have been displaced by all the different moving and shaking in this city as it has continued to grow and develop, just like at other cities that is not unique to DC. But when it comes to this football team, which is something that brings the city together, I still think that there is a way to do it at RFK that is respectful of that, is multi-use, does get the stadium back where it is best for a whole litany of reasons. And it's going to be up to the Harris Group to see how patient they want to be to fight the bureaucratic federal red tape that is currently on that site, to win over the hearts and minds of the city council members who don't want it and come up with a plan that satisfies them, and ultimately to pony up when it comes to the finances, because we know Maryland wants to keep it in Maryland and Virginia would love to have the team not just headquartered there, but play its games there as well. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. If you want the full interview from the Sports Junkies with Mayor Muriel Bowser, check it out in their podcast feed or by rewinding this morning in the free Odyssey app. When we get back, our training camp, pick 6 at 6. the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Anthony, just for the record, we did update the fine board in the break. Put on my 5-point fine from the RFK segment. Bad hosting. Failure to properly set up a soundbite. It's a 5-yard penalty. Honestly, I could have considered that a 10, but I think that was just a 5. It's a procedural penalty. Nothing terrible. So, fine board has been updated. We are now halfway to a payout, which is embarrassing because this system has been in place like a week. Whatever. All right. Off to our training camp. Pick 6 at 6. We started this yesterday. It went swimmingly well. And off we go again today. It's time for our training camp pick 6 at 6, which has us pick the 6 most important things from training camp on the day. Share them with you here on the Hoffman Show. We'll do it 6 o'clock each and every day that the Commanders practice. To me, this was the most interesting thing said at all today about anything. A reminder in many ways of what training camp is. Ron Rivera was asked about a couple of throws that Jacoby Brissett made, and his answer, very, very interesting and a good reminder about kind of, again, where we are this time of year and to not always believe your eyes in terms of everything you see is exactly as you see it.
Today I saw it from all 3 quarterbacks. You know, there was a couple of throws that you asked Sam Weiss, said, well, I had that, but I wanted to see if I could get that. And that's what camp is for. You know, you is to see what your limits and abilities are. Whether you have that kind of ability to make that play, that's good for him to learn, as long as he knows it. You know, so for him to say, well, I know I had that, but I saw that, want to see if I get that. That's a good thing. With Jacoby, you see Jacoby, and there's a couple of throws that you say, oh, now that's a vet. He saw that as a veteran. He saw that. And that's the thing that's kind of helping, because as we watch Jacoby go through it, I can see Sam sometimes the light bulb going off, and then sometimes just wondering, did he see it or not?
Yeah, so this is the time of year that you want to try stuff. And to see these guys pushing the limits, and especially I think the most important part of that is Jacoby and especially Sam being able to go back to Ron, go back to EB and be like, yeah, no, I saw this thing. That's the throw I probably would have made, but I wanted to see if I could do the other thing. As long as it's not just like, I don't know, man, I tried something. Too bad it didn't work. It's like, no, I went through the proper process. I saw that I could have done X. I know X is there. I wanted to see if Y was available. Turns out it's not. I think it's really, really healthy this time of year. Finally healthy today was Deron Payne. Big fella, fresh off his contract, out there after missing the first 2 days with a toe injury. And then, I'm sure he loved this. Deron, not a guy who's loves talking to the media, but he'll do it. He's professional. And I will say this, just like on the whole, Allen, Payne, Sweat especially, those 3 guys that have come up together the last couple of years. Obviously, Chase has been out a lot, so I'm not going to lump him in here. They have all gotten better with the media. They're all more expansive now. They're all more insightful. They're all so confident in what they see. And they've actually, even though I think all of them, if you ask them, would much prefer to never have to answer questions from us, have actually become really insightful guys at the podium. Like I remember Allen's rookie year, he was straight out of Nick Saban's school. I could have predicted his answers to every question. They were short, sweet, to the point, punchy, and didn't tell you a damn thing. Now a lot more insightful. Anyway, here's Payne today on learning from the success that he had last year and trying to balance expectations for this coming season.
I mean, for us right now, like Coach Del Rio's biggest emphasis for us is like starting out slow. Like we always start out slow, and then later on in the season we kind of get to hit our stride. So this year we just want to come out the gate fast, swinging, and get straight to it. So we're not playing like a whole bunch of meaningful games later on in the year and having to go crazy hard trying to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when he says, playing meaningful games late in the year, you want to be playing meaningful games late in the year. You don't want it to be so meaningful that every game, if you lose it, you're done. You want to give yourself cushion. You want to give yourself wiggle room. And the defense, as good as it has ultimately been, has definitely started really slow. I think Cam Curl plays a really big part in that, especially last year. As for the D-line, here was Daron Payne on the expectations this year for specifically that unit.
I just want to go out there and take over games. Like, I want us to be the most dominant group on the field, like every game. Like, we got the capability to do that. We got a bunch of monsters on the edge, and then we got me, J.A., Ridgeway, and a whole bunch of other guys on the interior. So I feel like we got all the pieces we need to just take over games, dominate, and just lead the team.
It's funny because last night I recorded with my guy Danny Parkins, who does a show in Chicago, but also has a national NFL podcast called First and Pod. He and Andrew Filipponi do it. Really good listen. Every game, every week is kind of their mantra. So if you want a good recap of all the NFL games once they get into the rhythm of the season, definitely check out First and Pod. But Danny and I we're talking last night. Pony's finishing up paternity leave, so he had me on as kind of a guest host, and we went a bunch of different directions. And we talked a lot about the things that we've talked about during the summer about Shanahan and McVay and kind of how they think about football. And we got a lot of X's and O's and kind of nerdy stuff. And the one thing I don't want to say regret about the conversation, but the one thing that I don't think I brought up enough in the conversation is exactly what Daron Payne just brought up. You got guys in OC positions and head coach positions now all around the league that are trying to come up with all these different ways to manipulate space and get the ball in playmakers' hands and think about all this stuff. And that's great. If your offensive line is not getting destroyed and your quarterback is not running for his life at all times. All the stuff that Logan calls winning with the pen doesn't matter if you get smashed in the trenches. It's the classic Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan until you get hit in the face. The defensive line is the unit that can take any game plan and shred it. Just absolutely shred it. We want to get the ball to these guys in these situations. Good luck. Chase Young is on top of your quarterback. Montez Sweat's flushing your quarterback. Jonathan Allen's coming up the middle with a hand in your quarterback's face. All that stuff goes straight in the bin. So I love hearing that from Daron Payne and certainly expect them to win more than a few games this year by doing that exact thing, which also, by the way, lowers the bar of what Sam Howell has to do on the offensive side of the ball. If you only got to score 17 to win, hell of a lot easier. You can be a little bit more conservative with your game plan. Eric Bieniemy can manage the game as a play caller in a slightly different way. It's our training camp, pick 6 at 6. 6 most important things from the day at Commanders training camp at 6 o'clock. First 2, a good reminder from Ron Rivera on some context of when you see, for instance, a quarterback like Sam Howell throw an interception like he did today. It's not necessarily a bad thing all in all. Daron Payne talking today about the D-line and expectations. Brian Robinson also spoke today. B-Rob is a guy that, obviously had a traumatic, in a very literal human sense, year last year. And he is a rookie swimming upstream, trying to make it in the NFL, third-round pick, playing a really tough position. And then he looks to be on a great path and is the random victim of a carjacking and gets shot in the leg. And I think what's amazing is I think a lot of us got to a point last year where like, damn, this guy's back. He looks great. Hell yeah, let's go. What a story. And it turns out, even as good as he got last year, it's not even close to what he thinks he can be. And that's just from a physical standpoint. Nevertheless, the experience and maturity that come with being an NFL veteran. Here's Robinson speaking for the first time in camp today.
Now, one time I felt like Brian Robinson. So, that's night and day from then to now. So people should expect a lot of great things to come for you compare all the things I did while I was limping around all year last year.
Pretty damn impressive for a guy that was quote-unquote limping around. Robinson went on to say that his knee and hip specifically just never felt right last year. And Rivera has talked about how Robinson and Antonio Gibson have been or are leaner coming in this year. That wasn't necessarily a mandate. Rivera was actually asked directly, like, hey, did Bieniemy tell them to slim down a little bit? And they said no, but what they realized as they looked at Bieniemy's offense is both of them needed to get a little bit quicker. Maybe they could lose a little bit of the weight and the power and things like that. Like Robinson's still enormous. Like he's going to truck dudes because he's huge. And frankly, AG will too. Like AG's a big dude and he's fast, which means like, look, I don't remember a lot from physics, but force equals mass times acceleration. He's still got mass, even if he doesn't have quite as much of it. And boy, does he have acceleration. So these guys still are going to be able to run through the tackles, but there's a little more shiftiness and a little more quickness to their game this year because Bieniemy's going to require it. Part of the reason that he's going to require it is these guys are going to be out in space and not just shifty as ball carriers, but shifty as route runners. And to me, that has been one of the most interesting things so far. I know I've touched on this, but I'm going to reiterate it here. Brian Robinson is a way better downfield threat than I ever anticipated he would be based off of everything I heard about him at college. It's just not something that Alabama had him do. So to watch him come in this year and be running up the seam basically as a receiver, you're like, wow, that was a great catch. Who ran that route? Who caught that? That was Brian Robinson? Like, watch out. Watch out. He's going to show up in places you don't expect. And another interesting comment, kind of sidebar, I'm going to put this at number 3.5, if you will, on our pick 6 at 6, is Ron spilled a little bit more today about Antonio Gibson's role. He said he could definitely get some of the snaps in terms of usage that Curtis Samuel has gotten the last couple years, where he's moving around, he's in motion, he's getting jet sweeps, he's running certain routes that have traditionally gone to Samuel. And I think what's fascinating about that, and I think once we have a couple of games worth of tape under our belt, this is something that Logan and I will do on the podcast, is comparing those types of snaps for Samuel and Gibson, not just to guys like Tyreek Hill and Jerick McKinnon in the past in Kansas City, but to some of the stuff that Travis Kelce has done as well. How do you get your best space players in space? In Kansas City, it was Kelce. Here, Samuel Gibson, certainly high on the list. All right, next up on our pick 6 at 6, how about Dyami Brown? Made another huge play today. Obviously, we expected growth from him, one, because he's continuing to get older and more experienced, and you'd hope after a disappointing first couple of years that he would do that. But with Sam Howell as college quarterback at the helm, would he be getting better? Yes, Howell and Brown have spent a lot of time together this offseason, but Ron Rivera says Brown's also improved in a vacuum without just being there with Sam Howell.
I see Dyami more confident, more comfortable in his route running right now. He's more precise, he's sharper, and you see him going after the ball. And that's something we saw coming out of the draft a few years back, that this guy led the NCAAs in contested catches. So that's one of the things that we're happy to see again.
Love to see that from Dyami Brown. Had a big play. That was also a big play for Hal in practice today. A bounce back type of play after Hal threw the pick. And again, number one in this is that the pick is fairly excusable based off of what Ron Rivera told us after practice. But to see, okay, fine, I threw one, let me come back and see what I got, and find Dyami Brown deep on a shot down the middle, I think is a fantastic sign about the resiliency of Sam Howell, a very, very, very important trait, especially for young quarterbacks. Fifth thing is the attendance of not just another couple thousand fans today, but one very tall fan in particular, Kevin Durant, at practice today for Ron Rivera and the Commanders.
Somebody told me that coming off, so it's great to have. It is great to have KD here. I know he's a local guy. I know how much of a Washington Redskins / Commander fan he is. Great to have his support. I mean, it's great to have the fan base back. I mean, this has been really cool the last couple of days. It has. I'm looking forward to tomorrow because a lot of people will be off. They're going to be coming, and we're expecting a pretty good crowd. So this is exciting. It is. So to have guys like KD come back and show their support means an awful lot to us.
It was something that the past couple of years, I feel like Durant's always been very consistent. But you definitely saw some of the kind of luminary type of fans fade away in a way they hadn't previously, where even through the name drama and kind of that argument and some of the embarrassing things that Snyder did over the years, like when they had the welcome home luncheon, which is a big deal every single year, like Dale Earnhardt Jr. would still come and speak. Matthew McConaughey, I remember he was scheduled one year, then had a schedule conflict and couldn't come, but like he still sent a video and still made it very clear, like, I'm supporting the team. This isn't about like me protesting, like I just I'm on a movie set and we didn't finish in time or whatever the reason was that he couldn't make it. I don't remember the details. But like 2020, 2021, even back to like 2019, like you don't see those folks around quite as much anymore towards the end of the Bruce Allen era and early in this Ron Rivera era. Nothing to do with Rivera, everything to do with Rivera's boss. So to see these guys already starting to re-engage with the team, and I think especially for a lot of them to like be pretty blunt about, having a clear conscience or excited about the new chapter, and to not try to couch it and feel like they need to be nice to Dan. Like, even if Dan was nice to them because they were rich and famous and those are the only people that Dan Snyder was nice to on a regular basis, that's fantastic. But I think more importantly, final point 6 of our training camp pick 6 at 6 is that the average fan is having a great time. The average fan is showing up. And I still cannot get over what Ben Standig told us earlier. He said the team has told him and other reporters that they're expecting 10,000 people tomorrow in Ashburn. That's crazy. That's crazy. Anthony, I would go as far as to say that there were games I covered at FedEx Field as a beat reporter, especially 2018, 2019, where, like, into the first quarter, there weren't 10,000 people at FedEx Field. Like, I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, but, like, there were some late season games. I feel like there was a game late season against the Broncos. It was, like, Christmas Eve 2019 or something like that. And, like, there was probably 20, 25,000 there by the end. Because it's an NFL game, and it's a big stadium, and even with all the tarps and stuff, like, I guess it was half full, but like, if you told me there was 12,000 people there and you had counted, like, I wouldn't have second guessed you. And they're expecting 10,000 tomorrow for practice. For practice. Hey, family day, Saturday, kids are out of school. We only got a couple more weekends left. How do you want to spend the day? I want to go to Commanders football practice. Imagine saying that last year. Imagine saying that the year before. Not a thing. Nobody showed. Maybe they get a couple hundred people out there on some of the bigger days. Maybe 1,000 on the biggest. They're going to have 10,000 allegedly in Ashburn tomorrow. Now, will 10,000 show? They've given 10,000 tickets. I don't want to say sold because they're free. But they've, executed 10,000 tickets. It's going to be hot. People are going to hear about, oh, it was a little difficult to get in and out. Oh my God, there's 10,000 people. I don't want to be in that crowd. So will they actually get 10,000? Probably not. But if they get 7, if they get 8, that's still nuts. That's crazy. And it makes me wonder too, like, we keep our eyes on FedEx for week 1, and I think that will be a 60,000 person sellout, or whatever the number is. But I wonder how many people, if they do an open practice at FedEx Field like they've done the last couple of years, like, are you going to get 30, 40,000 like they do in Green Bay where they sell out the stadium? Like, are you going to get a real NFL crowd for a practice when they practice at FedEx Field? What's going to happen for the preseason games? What's the atmosphere going to be like? I'm very, very curious in a way that I did not, I don't know. I asked Ben earlier, like, did we underestimate somehow, despite all that we knew that this fan base coming back, did we somehow underestimate it? He pushed back on that a little bit. I don't know, man. Did you think they'd have 10,000 for the first Saturday practice?
Not necessarily 10,000, but I understand this,
If you told me 5, I would have been like, that tracks.
Yeah.
10?
10 is a lot.
It's a lot of people, bro.
But it's that renewed, faith, renewed loyalty, excitement. I feel like, we're starting to get our fans back. How the saying Stella got her groove back? I think that's more so like what this franchise has gotten back now that we're in a new era.
I totally agree. And I thought it would take, a little bit of time, a little bit of winning, all that kind of stuff, some competency. It took Josh Harris's signature on the paperwork. And now here we are. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up next, we will do our first roster projection of the spring. We're going to write it down. We'll save it, the whole deal, see how it is when they eventually cut the roster to 53. But I want to see how many spots are even up for grabs. I was talking with Doc Walker in a break earlier, and I told him I think I can project the 53, like 51 of them right now. See if I can do it. Next, the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app.
A new era of the burgundy and gold is here. Follow every move of white.
Anthony, you changed clothes.
Yes, I did have a little wardrobe change during the commercial break.
You sure did, sir. Looking good? Ready to go to Drake?
I am ready. The doors opened at 7, and as you already know, we get off at 7. So I had to come clothes in hand, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But like, Drake ain't going on at 7. I don't know who's opening and whether you actually care about that, but like, let's be real. Drake ain't gonna go on at 7.
Yeah, but the thing is, so I'm supposed to be meeting my girlfriend and a couple of my frat brothers and their girlfriends, and at this spot called Puttery. It's not too far from Capital One. That's where we're supposed to meet up, and then we're supposed to head over. So I just wanted to be dressed and ready to, call my Uber, get there, eat, fill up for the concert, because Capital One prices are, a little steep sometimes.
Yeah. Also, though, Uber, Metro situation, just saying, getting to Capital One from here is pretty easy. Could do that, too.
Dang, should I Metro?
I think it's a strong possibility. We need to discuss where you're going, your whereabouts live on the air. But like, let's chat offline.
Okay.
Get you situated in the right direction. Okay. I would like to do a 53-man roster projection. These are always fun to do, but I think with the very little bit of data that we've seen to start camp, I think we can safely do one that I am predicting, Anthony, is going to have, barring injuries screwing us up in a major way, I'm going to safely say 50 of the 53 players correct. If not, 53 for 53. I feel very confident about this because there just aren't a lot of position battles. And so I think that we can get this right.
Okay. I'm curious as to see what you project, because I think, there are a couple of positions we just don't know how many they're going to keep. And, that usually dictates.
Totally hear you. And in many ways, like the position battle is going to be like fourth running back versus fifth linebacker versus fourth tight end kind of thing.
There you go.
But let's see. All right, I've got a spreadsheet up. So if you're watching on the stream, you're going to see our very, very, very fancy graphic here, which is I literally have a Google spreadsheet open. But this is going to allow us to track it. So QB1, Sam Howell. I already started to fill in some of the positions too. We're obviously not going to spend a ton of time on some of these because we don't have a ton of time to do this. We could probably have done this for like a full half hour, but we're just going to go. My first question, though, is Jake Fromm going to make the roster? Do they just carry 2 quarterbacks, or do they go 3 and keep Fromm on the practice squad? I think they'll go 3 deep. I think they carried 3 last year, obviously, with Howell. A lot of teams are carrying 2 now, but I'm gonna put a little asterisk by Jake Fromm, because if I need a roster spot, I'm coming back to that, and I'm gonna put him on the practice squad. So there's my first chance for someone to go sideways. Any thoughts, Anthony? Make sense? Agree? Disagree?
Isn't there a new rule where you can elevate?
Yeah, there is a that's true. So
I don't think he makes the roster.
I think that's true. I did forget about the new rule. So we're going to go ahead and move all this up. I'll edit the rest of this as we go. Okay, so we got 2 of those, and we're going to put Fromm on the practice squad. So Jake from Georgia, you go over there. All right, running back. Obviously, Brian Robinson. He's going to make the team. Antonio Gibson will make the team. I think Chris Rodriguez is safe. It's not a 100% lock because you got guys like Jonathan Williams who are very talented. But here's the thing. Every single year, every single team is like, that last running back, if we don't keep him, we can't get him on the practice squad. Someone's going to scoop him up. But the thing is, every team's doing it. Remember, the running back market is screwed because there's so much talent. I don't think there's any issue getting Jared Patterson or Jonathan Williams to the practice squad. I think they'll be fine. I think you just carry 3. The one thing I would say is Williams specifically has a lot of special teams experience, but I think they're, the 2 main guys and the rookie who you drafted and is, a Bieniemy draft pick. So that's my 3.
I like it.
Okay. Wide receiver, Terry McLaurin, check. Jahan Dotson, check. Curtis Samuel, check. De'Ami Brown, no-brainer. Then this is where this gets fun. This is one of the spots that I'm actually very unsure of. I think it comes down to, let's say, 3 guys. I think Dax Milne is still going to be in play. He obviously made the team last year, but I would probably put him third. And I think it's the 2 former Chiefs. I think it's Marcus Kemp, and I think that it is Byron Pringle, who they just signed. But, like, Kazmir Allen is interesting. He's a guy that could make it because they want him to be the returner, and he's looked very good so far. I'm going to guess, as of today, that it's Kemp or Pringle. And I'm going to go Marcus Kemp. He's been a good special teamer in Kansas City. I'm going to put him on the roster, but that's probably the one that I feel least good about.
So who's not making it? So is Kazmir Allen making it?
Kazmir Allen, no. Byron Pringle, no. Dax Milne, no.
And you're only keeping 6 receivers.
I'm keeping 5. I might come back and add one. You want to know what? I'm going to go ahead and add one. I'm going to go ahead and add Kazmir Allen.
Isn't that 6?
No, because you got the main 4. You got McLaurin, Dotson, Samuel Brown.
Exactly. And then you said Milne.
No, Milne's not making it.
Oh,
I don't think Milne
5
makes
receivers is crazy.
You think it's going to be 6?
Personally, I think it's going to be 7.
Ooh. Now there's a spicy take.
I think it's going to be 7. You have Kemp. You have Kazmir Allen. I think he's.
And there's like a couple of other guys, like Jalen Sample. Like Sample had a really nice touchdown yesterday. They're loaded at that position.
It's too early to project just because we haven't seen these guys on the special teams. But my best bet, or if I had to guess, Kemp, Kazmir Allen, and then also Milne.
Yeah, I think Milne's dead in the water. Good player, but he's what was the kid? Trey Quinn a couple years ago. That's who he is.
Yeah.
All right. I think 4 tight ends. I think it's Logan Thomas. I think it's John Bates. I think it's Curtis Hodges. And I think it's Cole Turner.
Yep.
If one of them doesn't make it, I think it's Hodges, but I think all 4 are going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Then you get fun. Then you got O-line. All right. And actually, yeah, I'll just put O-line there. Now I'm having to type out the positions, which is going to slow us down, but I'll try to type quickly. All right. Charles Leno.
Yep.
Good. At left guard, Sadiq. Charles is going to be there. Starting center will be Nick Gates.
Yep.
Cosby. Yep. I'm just getting a little bit of O-line copy-paste here. Sam Cosme.
Wiley.
Andrew Wiley. And then I think it will be Chris Paul.
Yep.
As one of the backups. Cornelius Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say Ricky Stromberg.
Yep.
Then one more would make for 9 O-linemen. Who's the 9th O-lineman?
I think Trent Scott is a practice
I think he's a practice squad player, the guy they signed from Pittsburgh. It's probably another internal guy with position flex.
Maybe a Braden Daniels?
I think it's probably Braden Daniels. They did draft him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go Braden Daniels right now, although that's one I don't feel good about because I don't
we
think
ain't
he's
seen
actually,
too much of him, to be honest.
I think he's not very good.
Yeah.
So that's 25 on offense, which is, leaves us 25 on defense plus the 3 specialists. All right, D-line. This is actually hard/easy because you just have so many good players.
Too many.
Literally too many. So we're going to have to make some tough cuts here as we're doing our first roster projection of the spring after just a couple of days. And there was one player in particular that tickled my fancy for this when Standig was on and we haven't gotten to yet. So we'll get to him in just a minute. D-line, Chase Young.
Yep.
Cool. John Allen. Deron Payne. Montez Sweat. James Smith-Williams. He's a lock.
Phil Mathis.
Phil Mathis is a lock. John Ridgway.
Yep.
Is a lock.
F.A.
And I think F.A. and Casey. F.A. Obata. But now that's a lot of D linemen.
How many is that?
That is, I believe, 11. No, that's not that many. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, no, 9. That's good. Sometimes you keep 10, but probably that's often in like a 3-4 situation, and you're counting your edge guys. I think that's probably the right number, but we might have a spot for one more. In which case I could see David Bada. Actually, nope. You know who I'm forgetting? KJ Henry. He's making the team. And I think he can help you on special teams. He's a good enough athlete. So I am going to go 10 there.
Okay.
All right. Then we get to linebacker.
Jamin?
Yeah, I think, let's see if we got room for, I think they might go 4.
4.
Jamin Davis.
Yep.
Cody Barton.
Mm-hmm. David.
Mayo. David Mayo.
And then Kalik.
Mayo. Kalik Hudson.
And then
whose name I definitely just did not spell right. Apologies to Kalik Hudson. Well, he spells it like that, right?
It's Khaleke.
Yeah. I don't know why I did it. Leek. But then, here's the thing. They've been super high on guys like Milo Eifler, and they've kept around special teams, and Dejon Harris. None of those guys are making it, who, by the way, are excellent special teams players.
I would say at the most 1, but we have so many defensive backs that I think
you're probably right.
Yep.
So that gets to corner.
We're at 14 right now.
Let's see, probably 5 corners, and I think they will keep at least 5 safeties, and that actually would work out the math. So, at corner, you've got Emmanuel Forbes,
Benjamin,
BSJ, Kendall Fuller,
Wild Goose.
That's the guy that I think people are underrating. I think Rashad Wild Goose is a lock.
They
to
like
make this
him
roster.
a lot.
He has been playing with the ones. With the ones.
Yeah.
So then you got those 4. I'm going to say Christian Holmes, 7th rounder from last year. But
6 corners, Danny.
And then Danny Johnson, who's always good to have around.
Yeah.
But I could see those last 2 corners changing out for sure. The kid, I think his name is Nick White. He's made a couple plays, 24 in red.
Oh, yep.
He's made a couple plays. Yeah, he had a pick. I could definitely see that. But then you get to safety, and safety is jammed. And also, what is Quan Martin? So let's go safety. You got Derek Forrest, Cam Curl,
Quan
Martin,
Percy Butler, and then Revo,
and then Jeremy Reeves. Anybody else that you think can crack that safety rotation?
Yours truly, Trap Troy Apke. I'm joking.
No, but
they love him though. Here,
he's a great special teams player. Very, very bad defensive back, but could he make the team on special teams? That's one of, if I'm picking 3 guys, like the Christian Holmes, Danny Johnson spot.
Yeah.
Could that be Troy Apke? Because that's really a glorified special teams guy. And all of a sudden, if a couple of your safeties get hurt, or a couple of your corners get hurt, you can just make that switch, and it's not that big of a loss. But Troy Apke is the upgrade potentially on special teams. And Tress Way, best player on the team. Kicker is, of course,
Joey Sly.
And then Cheese as your long snapper. That's your 53. How many of those guys are you not confident about?
The corners you named, or the last 2, sorry.
The last 2 corners.
Yep.
Johnson and Holmes. I'm not confident there. I'm not confident that seeing this roster construction, they won't keep a 4th running back. You can always see them taking an 11th off, an additional offensive lineman, and I could see Braden Daniels not making the team.
Yeah.
We did leave off one of the 7th round picks, the other Andre Jones. So I'm not super confident there, but.
And then also I'm not super confident with KJ, but high energy guy. Could be special teams, like you said.
He's a good enough athlete to play teams. He's also a 5th rounder. Yeah. So, I'm pretty confident that
what
he'll
about Braden Daniels?
Make the team. Daniels, even though he's a 4th, I don't think he's that good.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other teams didn't have a super high grade on him. So you can probably sneak him through if you want to. Or maybe he becomes the John Ridgeway with the Cowboys. They thought they could sneak him through, and he didn't. And that's the other thing, too, is that, the 53 that happened on the day that the 53, quote unquote, is named could change 2 days later if they claim someone off waivers from another team. But I think going in, I don't feel great about Kemp and Casimir Allen. I don't feel great about them not keeping a 4th running back. I don't feel great about Holmes Johnson as the last 2 corners. Other than that, I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
So now we see what happens. Well, I think we do this again right after the joint practices.
Okay.
Or maybe before even the joint practices, going into them. And then we'll do a final one, obviously, on cut day.
Yeah.
All right. That's our 53, kids. There you go. We'll post that up on YouTube if you want to be able to go, pause, rewind, whatever, and watch it. And I'll see if I can find a way to export the spreadsheet and share that some way. It's the Hoffman Show, or maybe I'll make a fancier graphic and we'll put that in the on-demand version on YouTube. That seems like a good use of time. All right. Quick look at what's trending and then real things to wrap up the show on a Friday.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Excellent news out of Cincinnati, where Joe Burrow is only going to be out a couple of weeks, has a strained calf, no ligament damage, no joint damage, just a strained calf for the Bengals quarterback. DC Sports tonight here in the district, Spirit hosting at Audi Field, trying to bounce back after a bad loss last time out at North Carolina. They face Gotham FC. Nats up in New York to take on the Mets. That is a 7:10 first pitch. That's what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980. All right, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app Anthony, you're ready. You're ready for the weekend. You got your shades on inside. There's not, what if to get everybody fired up at Capital One Arena in just a few moments, Drake's Crew played Friday by Rebecca Black to get everyone hyped up right before he came on stage. You think that would go over well?
I don't think it will go over well at all.
Would you be dancing your face off?
Oh, I would definitely be fist pumping. Hey.
I don't doubt it.
Yes, sir.
I don't doubt it. I wish I had my sunglasses with me. Rachel is actually bringing me my sunglasses because she got me sunglasses. My wife, Angel, she knows that I am the worst when it comes to sunglasses. So she got me a couple of cheap pairs. And it's like, they even came in a case of 2 so that when you inevitably lose one, there's already a replacement waiting. That's the kind of sunglasses I need. She's bringing them so I can have them at the game. But you got yours on right now. So that's why you watch the stream, kids. You never know what you'll see from young Anthony Haney. YouTube.com/@theteam980. You do know what happens at the end of the show, though. It's time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
I've got a couple real quick, starting with Deron Payne today, talking about his coach, who we talked about yesterday. Jeff Skanina is a big man. And today, he was apparently wearing some little shorts.
What do you think about his short shorts?
I told him, I think he said he didn't get him hemmed. I think he got him hemmed to be like that.
I just think his legs might be that big. Like, if you're Jeff Skanina, how tall do you think he is, Anthony?
He's a good 6'3", maybe taller. I don't know.
Yeah,
he's a big guy.
Tall. And then his legs are the size of, like, California redwoods. They don't make shorts in those sizes. Like, a what-inch inseam does that man need? Also with a what-inch, like, waist. And it's not like he's, like, rotund. He's just, like, he's just wide. Like I said yesterday, Jeff Skanina is the human version of the wide load trucks coming through. It's a brick house. It's not soft. This is not, a bouncy house in a truck. This is an actual brick house coming at you in real life. It's a large man.
But my thing is, he could get bigger shorts. He just chooses to wear, a tight fit, I guess.
I just think that's how generally shorts are going to fit him because he's a muscular man. I think we've talked enough about Jeff Skanina's shorts. That's me. It's my show. I'm gonna keep it moving. What else are you doing this weekend, man? By the way, on the way out here.
All I'll be doing is tonight, Drake.
Yeah.
Tomorrow,
recovering from
fight.
Drake until the fight. Yeah.
And then Sunday I have football practice.
Nice. How's the hamstring feeling these days, by the way?
It's a lot better.
That's good. It's good. We love that. I don't really have a lot this weekend, which is nice. I after the craziness of the last couple of days of training camp, I looked at Rachel yesterday and I was like, I think I could just use a day of silence. I think I just want to sit home and stare at the ceiling and not hear people talk, which is saying something for a radio host who talks all the time. I don't want to hear my own voice. I don't necessarily want to hear others. I just want to sit. I don't need to go full Aaron Rodgers darkness retreat, but I think I need a day or two of silence. I'll probably be all right. Then we're gonna go to a stadium full of people right now, so it is what it is. I think that's how I felt yesterday. Honestly, today's been kind of refreshing. You love to see it. Commanders practice tomorrow. Make sure you follow your favorite local beat reporter for full coverage of that via Twitter. I will not be out there, so don't look at my stuff, but looking forward to hearing about it. Again, estimated 10,000 tickets sold by the team, so that's going to be pretty sweet. We'll talk about it all on Monday on the Hoffman Show right here on the Team 980.
The Kevin Sheehan Show. Now weekly